I do want you to take seriously the comment about God that I suggested you write down. And if anybody wants to share, after we went through the entire last day, we didn't talk about God per se, but we did talk about consciousness quite a bit. So now, in retrospect, what you wrote down, look at it, and in retrospect, if you think making a comment is worthwhile, please ask for the microphone and make a comment on how your concept of God has changed or not changed in the last 24 hours. Okay? You have very
in the sense that in the past, for me, God was the universe itself, as in the sense as it's recreating in itself, so everything is being created by it. But after yesterday, a lot of surprises arise as if it's this oneness, no locality, and we connect with this non-locality, and it's like waves of possibility as well, so it's always changing. There is no way that there can be a concept of God that is static, because then it would be always changing.
okay. This is a good observation. Anyone else? Yes. What is that?
I agree with you. In fact, I wrote it yesterday, and I never thought about a definition of God before. So the first change is the definition itself. So I tried to cover in my mind, but I couldn't. So I decided that I could define it that God is the possibility that I've been experienced, that I know, but also the experience and the possibility that I still don't know.
Okay.
And usually, before yesterday, when I think about God, the first image in my mind was compassion, just only compassion. I don't know why. And now it's everything. It's more than compassion.
It's more meaningful.
Yes.
Okay. Good. Anyone else? Okay.
Dr. Swami, Sweta has a statement here on God.
Okay.
Sweta, can you speak? You can speak.
Yeah. So you asked that what is God? So according to me, God is the innermost, purest of the pure, the deepest, innermost essence in all of us, in the entire creation, the ground of all being, and from which the entire creation comes into being, sustained by Him, and into which the entire creation goes back.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. And yes, thank you.
For me, when I start to think about the definition of God, it comes into my mind that it is just like defining a PhD person by a 6th class or first class student. So defining God is really, I found difficult. But what I can feel that it is like an essence which is manifested through all of us in different form. In all living beings, there God resides and manifested in all persons, and we can see Him in anyone.
Okay.
So, as far as the definition is concerned, the only one possibility which I could find is related with the qualities. we cannot define God, but we can think about the qualities like love, compassion, truthfulness, abundance, wholeness. These all things we can think that these may be the qualities in God. But for me, defining Him is really difficult.
Good. Good. Okay.
Me.
First Maria, then Amir. And
I think
Victoria.
Patricia also has a question.
Okay, Patricia can ask also in between. Okay, Maria, you go.
For me, God is our entire universe. And I feel,
I'm not hearing you.
Hold the speaker.
sorry. Yeah?
Closer.
For me, God is not.
Hold it closer to your mouth.
Hold it close.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Now?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, yes.
It's the first time that I use
It's
this
okay.
microphone. I need to press this more.
Keep it close.
And God for me is like the entire universe. I more feel that it's everything that lives or not. It's materials, electrons, it's everything that we have in the universe. When you did yesterday with us, I closed my eyes. I only flight, I dissipate in the universe, and I feel God. God for me is this. All us together. It's the same.
Okay?
Okay? Something like this.
Thank you for sharing. Good.
God for me is infinity in all powerful presence, which sometimes I feel, sometimes I lost connection, sometimes I know every time I can speak. This is my feeling. If I give a question come to me through in other people, through the sign of the billboard, through the noise, voice. For me, it's something what I cannot describe. It's bigger than me. I'm part of that. And it's always here. And I feel it was here before me. It will be here always. This is God for me.
Okay. Good. Amir? Oh, we have Patricia. Wait, hold on.
Yeah, Patricia, if you have a question.
For me, God is a state of being, a state of creation and connection. So every time we are being created, we are experiencing the state of God, and maybe God. So God for me maybe is a creative state and also a connection between all beings. As creating is also an act of love. So it's like being part of the wholeness, the oneness.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Good.
what I feel.
Good. Okay.
I think
Amir?
Shweta has something to add also.
Shweta also has something? Good. Go ahead, Shweta.
Sir, the whole of the manifested creation, even the unmanifested world, and even which we can't perceive with our normal senses, is God. Then the entirety, infinity in itself is God. Truth is God, bliss is God, existence, consciousness, bliss is God.
Okay. You covered everything. That's a good strategy. Okay, Amir.
So what I find is that there are many ideas trying to capture the essence of God. The idea that appeals to me the most comes from that famous quote that you keep making is Aham Brahmasmi. And when I try to think, okay, how do I define God? an essence that my mind can capture and talk about. Because I am limited to finally what I can express in words. So I think it's about the idea of a perfect version of myself. How perfect I can be in different aspects. That is God. So once I achieve that perfection, I know what God is.
Okay. Good. Amita?
Personally, I don't know what God is, but during the meditation, the experiences have been of connecting with some sources where intuition becomes more, and it's like the answers are available, and only those answers which really I need to ask that I put over there. But then what I understand from talking to different spiritual people, they see some light in deep meditations, which I have not experienced. So I'm working towards that. But at the same time, for certainly all the higher thoughts, higher feelings seem to have that as an essence, a godlike essence. There's a purity in it, which is really heartwarming and really looked up to. So those aspects seems to be connected with God, but God being, I'm not sure.
Okay. Good. Gopal, Emma?
Yeah, for me, God is eternal, energetic, pure, peaceful, and powerful energy.
Okay. Anyone else wants to make a comment? Clarissa.
My conception of God completely changed in the last years. Many years ago, before the quantum activism was supposed to be like a male image, someone judging, And after yoga practice and also our work together, I can have a sense of God being a loving presence that pervades everything that is just like about presence.
Okay. Yes.
So what I am realizing about the God, I know what God is like. God is a huge energy, which is available everywhere, all the time. And as I observe, as an observer, I make the shape of whatever I want to make in my mind. So according to that, that energy gives whatever I want actually. And that's a huge energy. The God is a huge energy about it.
Good.
Time.
I'm sorry.
Just on? I am actually struggling with the word God. I was born Catholic, and I had the same view as Clarissa of a male figure when I hear the word God. And over the years, I understood that that was not what God means. And I started feeling God like nature, like being in everything, like someone else also said. Nowadays, I feel more comfortable thinking of the word consciousness. Whenever I invoke the word God, I feel that I still have these past ideas that I have of God, and they are not accurate to me anymore. So even on your books, which I love, when I hear the word, when I see the word God written, it still invokes to me all these past ideas that I have of God. So for me, my personal experience,
I prefer nowadays to think of consciousness, which is something that I can experience. Sometimes in a tree, sometimes in a person, sometimes I don't. But it's something mystical, hard to explain to me. But I have this struggle with the word God, and I believe because of this past condition, what came involved in it.
Good. So what's the purpose of doing this exercise? Undoubtedly, the concept of God is a comfort to us. Do you feel it as a comfort? No? No? Okay. How do you feel? Michael?
I guess I have, because I have the same idea that you just mentioned. So for me, in the past, God was not necessary. But I was always listening that for everybody was God and everything was God. And so then I thought maybe it's because they mean it somehow. And I somehow, I don't know why I handled not to, for me, nature and life and the universe itself was so amazing already that there was no this need. But now, understanding it from the consciousness side, from the non-locality side, I have felt like this expansion of possibilities because of now it has gained a lot of meaning.
Good. Okay. Wait for the comfort to come. The comfort in the thought of God is most people's anchor. The reason we introduce the concept of God in our vocabulary and it becomes so popular, religions capitalize on it, spiritual teachers constantly speak of God as well. And the reason for that, of course, is that we have spiritual experience, we have experience of expansion. This is, except for the dire intellectual or psychopath or sociopath, this experience of expansion cannot be denied. This is so powerful, so easy to fall into. So that expansion is what makes us wonder, and then of course the religions capitalized on it, introduce various images, those things corrupt our experience. But the reason that we fall back into the concept of God is that it brings some positivity in our life. Of course, there are many people who fear God. That is a religious conspiracy, unfortunately. Some religions ruined the concept of God by introducing the fear element. God will punish you if you don't behave in a certain way. That probably is the worst attack on God that religions have ever done, or taking advantage of their own motivations and agenda. But generally speaking, we invoke God for a variety of situations where we generally are in a little bit of discomfort and we want some comfort. We are in a little bit of despair, we want hope. We are in the throes of negativity and we want something positive. So God is that element to most of us. But of course, this is not a definition of God at all. This is why we like the concept. Some materialists have started, for this reason, some materialists have started identifying God with the brain circuit. That is a little bit caricature also, because then God becomes identified with some sort of response that we have on the basis of some kind of fairly universal memory. If we had such a spot in the brain, this is itself is debatable, but some people are saying that we do. If it is verified that yes, indeed, almost everyone has such a spot, and then that too give people that sense of something that we can call God or a spiritual experience. But that is a very poor way of thinking about it, because that's just a memory. Anything that is in the brain that we recall is just a memory. It can be collective memory, that's okay. It can be memory that is universally applicable, but still, it's just a memory. That's not a very useful concept. So, now, basically what I'm trying to say is that one element, except I think one of you touched upon it.
Dr. Shudi Shroff has something to add here. So he says that it seems all clear to me, after reading God is not dead, Godhead is all the possibilities and God is a causative agent, downward position, turning the possibilities into actualities.
Yes, except of course this has, again, the words cheat you a little bit, because at the same time we are saying that the downward projection could not take place without the tangled hierarchy. So it is missing an element, and it is to bring that out is why I asked the question yesterday. And it is amazing that how much we either forget or in that sentence I did not write it down because it makes the sentence too big. But the one crucial point that stands out in the way that God can be defined. Perpetuator of downward possession is perfectly okay, except that God cannot do it by itself. Right? That's what we are saying. There has to be a type of hierarchy somewhere in order for God to manifest. Otherwise, God is hopeless. Now, what is very interesting is that mystics, some mystics, not all, but Meister Eckhart especially stands out, Rabindranath Tagore stands out, and a few others. Upanishads come very close to it, in a sense. And that element is that they recognize this manifestation aspect, that otherwise God does not exist. Meister Eckhart was the most clear statement that I have read, this Christian wisdom. He once gave a sermon, and the sermon started like, okay, God, I need you. And then he starts shouting, but you also need me. I cannot exist without you, but you don't exist without me. More or less explicitly. Rabindranath Tagore has a song, beautiful song, that your joy is what makes my being sustainable. I tomar anando amar par, tumi tai esecho niche, amar noizeli phuvane shar tomar prem tujhe niche, I tomar anando amar par. Your joy is what is sustaining me, but without me, your joy would never manifest in the world. These are the clear statements of the tangled hierarchy that is necessary for manifestation of that oneness or source of downward causation with whatever we call it. This is a very, very interesting aspect of the quantum worldview. Quantum worldview, quantum physics, the physics of potentiality, it just defines what the potentialities are. And it gives us a beautiful picture that many people speak beautifully about. Infinite potentiality. I read so many people's writing. Infinite potentiality. Quantum physics defines infinite potentiality, which is true. literally and in an expansive way. Literally meaning that position itself, just how much position electron can have, infinite positions. So in that very restricted sense. But also when we open it up to us, thinking, feeling, intuition, then everything has infinite ways that we can see. Meaning, feeling, archetypes, everything manifested infinite faces in our experience. So this infinite potentiality is just a fantastic and exciting concept that quantum physics gives us. And of course, non-locality is a tremendous concept. And the recognition that we need a causal power outside of this causation interactions of objects. We need a causal power for making the world, for making objects which are waves of possibility into actuality. That recognition is also a huge recognition. That there is a cause outside of worldly cause between objects of material kind. This is tremendous for the scientists to close their minds. So this nobody can refute. Quantum physics is showing without any debate that yes, such a downward causation is essential in order to convert the possibilities into actual events that we can observe with experimental data. Although some people even try to avoid this concept. So all that is true, but when we get into the mechanism of how such an event, which we call collapse event, how such an event can take place, we get into this dilemma. And this dilemma is that why doesn't it take place in some objects? And why does it take place in some other objects? This is of course the distinction between living and non-living. Distinction between where experience is taking place and where experience isn't taking place. So the event of collapse produces the problem why, and that you already have hinted upon, some of you already expressed it in your conceptualization, which of course that the observer gets into the picture without the observer. And that's the dilemma. Where is the observer? Observer is not manifest unless collapse takes place. But collapse doesn't take place unless we have observer. This circularity is the basis for our understanding of how this potentiality, everything is potentiality, even downward causation is a potentiality. We can say that there's a potential for a force, or action, or choice. Some people think of it as a force, but of course one doesn't really need to. Because we have potentiality, which is different facets, it's more appropriate to call it choice. But whatever we call it, this process is waiting in potentiality. This concept, God, unity consciousness, everything is waiting in potentiality. Powerful concept. The reason we become so mystical yesterday, you've got to feel a bit mystical, very mysterious thing. And the ultimate mystery is this one. This huge paradox, that unless an observer appears, let it be a human being, very sophisticated observer, or let it be a single cell, very unsophisticated, very primitive observer. But until the observer is there, we cannot say that a collapse can occur. Observer is essential for that, making that difference. We have gone through, Kishan went through that again and again yesterday, right? That picture, possibility coupled to possibility cannot give you actuality. anything is possibility. You have to have the collapse in order to have actuality. But where is this observer then, which is required to produce such a collapse? So this gives us a hint that the world must be, the possibilities must consist of different kinds of possibility. So there is this unity consciousness, possibility, right? Possible unity consciousness. And then there must be certain possibilities which are special possibilities. They are not the possibilities of simple objects. Now let's only think of material objects, because material objects are, it would turn out, essential part of the collapse. Collapse cannot happen without the material objects. This is something, again, which is very, very significant. That without matter we cannot really have any collapse. So we think of material objects, and there the distinction can be easily made. Why? Because material objects are reducible objects. Big objects can be reduced to little objects. Bulk objects can be reduced to molecules, molecules can be reduced to atoms, atoms can be reduced to elementary particles. This much we know. So, but elementary particles are only potentialities. So possibilities make possibilities make possibility all the way to the brain, and we still have only possibility. And then why is the brain special? Why does the brain make an observer? Or why does a living cell make an observer? Do we have to reach the conclusion that there must be something special in the brain or the living cell that cannot be reduced like this? We can reduce like elementary particles, make atoms, make molecules, make a rock. And nobody would object, because rock can be completely described by the science that we build on the basis of this reductionism. There's nothing in the behavior of the rock that ever tells us that the reductionistic picture is not a complete picture of the behavior of the rock. But when it comes to living beings, there is that subject that appears, that we cannot refute. Living being can distinguish itself from the environment. That distinction has to be explained. How and why does it manage to have this ability to distinguish itself from the environment? Biology books are funny. Some of you are medical doctors, you have read biology books, and you know they are funny because they define life as characteristics, and they surreptitiously say that living beings have also the characteristic of distinguishing itself from the environment, except they put it surreptitiously. It's one of the characteristics of living beings. They never realize that this characteristic is not that living being can share with any other being, not with a rock, not with anything that is inanimate. And they lose a defining opportunity for a living being. Living being has this capacity, which is special because being a subject is not the same thing as being an object. This is what they miss. Experiencer and experience are different categories of logic. And a subject cannot be made of objects. Subject cannot be reduced to the objects. And this is the key. So something that is irreducible, something that is irreducible. I have read only one biologist who is an intelligent design theorist. I forget his name right now. Anyway, I'll remember his name later. But this guy, who is a professor of biology at Lehigh University in the USA, he wrote a book in which he introduced the phrase irreducible complex. So that's one guy who seemed to have realized that life has to have something irreducible. Now it turns out that a politician in South Africa, I guess, come from strange places, that it does not require to be a scientist to have great ideas. So this guy whose name is Mark, I think, S-L-U-T, politician. He had this idea that all these things that we find in human beings are live beings. All these differences arise because whole is greater than the part. The whole is greater than the part. Of course, he made the mistake of, again, like a philosopher, not a scientist, being a philosopher, he said all wholes are different than the parts. It's called the philosophy of holism. Like the concept is that the sofa is different from the conglomerate of molecules that make up the sofa. Now that of course is very easily refuted because as I said, scientists are completely positive, they can, the data after data shows that a rock can be completely explained, a sofa can be completely explained on the basis of the reductionistic picture. So holism is easily refuted. People sometimes argue about water molecule. Hydrogen and oxygen makes H2O, and immediately they say the whole is different from the parts because water has wetness. But what is wetness? Who experiences wetness? Wetness is a phenomenon that is experienced by us. It's a phenomenon that depends on the interaction of a sentient being with water. And they continue arguing, sophistry is such a funny thing. One can argue about anything. But it does not make any sense that reductionistic are right. Water can be completely explained on the basis of saying that composition of water is H2O, two hydrogen atoms, one oxygen atom, blend together in a certain way. So holism does not make sense in that way. But when you combine holism with this idea of irreducible complexity, then it starts making sense. What I'm saying is giving you a history of human thought to show you that people have been thinking in this direction. What quantum physics does is to bring it to the forefront because of this paradox of measurement. A measurement requires this circularity of distinction. Von Neumann first had a glimpse of this distinction. He just said, but when an observer enters the picture, somehow this process stops. Observer does. It is the fact that we do see things concrete, separate from ourselves. So no doubt that observer subject food is something special. Nobody can debate that I have collapsed the possibility wave. There's no debate here. Possibility wave is collapsed. If you say that the Geiger counter did it or photographic film did it, you can argue about it, as von Neumann did himself. That how can they collapse it because there are also possibilities. Or even the brain, you can say it's also a possibility. But if you say, then you are making a big mistake. Because brain is the observer. That's the other thing. If you define the observer separate from the brain, then you are introducing dualism. And that kind of dualism is not tenable with science. Because that just assumes that that consciousness is a dual reality, and being non-material, you have a real problem. How does consciousness interact with material? How does non-material interact with material? Huge problem. And if you think non-locality solves that, but non-locality is not that kind. Non-locality itself is a funny concept. It's non-local interaction between potentialities that correlate them. But unless you have manifest, then you cannot verify that idea that yes, non-locality produces correlation. So you cannot invoke non-locality just like that, because there is this problem still of how do we manifest these things. Non-locality, yes, but that is also a potential non-locality, potential correlation, until we have actualized those objects and seen the effect that yes, the two objects which interact, they become one. So everything is waiting in potentiality, and the magic really, like that magic story that the Sleeping Beauty, somebody has to touch the little what, I forget, but somebody has to do this magical thing and the kingdom will wake up with the sleeping beauty. And that magic is lacking. And that magic is, for human self, is in the observer. And then if we pay attention to the brain, we can make another jump. The brain must have something that is very special. Reducible to potentiality. They are all describable by quantum physics and potentiality. And then something in these objects, a brain, a living cell, is not reducible. We cannot say that this is subject to quantum dynamics. We cannot say what it is, but we can say with complete authority that no, this is not a possibility. Just that kind of possibility which will give us an object. This also produces a subject. Also is the key word. It's not that we are denying that yes, brain is an object too, because if a surgeon looks at the brain, certainly he or she can. So brain is an object. But for us, we never experience brain as an object. We cannot experience the brain as an object. Something different is taking place. We make brain into a subject. We experience brain as the self. Brain is our self. Very confusing thing. So what produces that identity of consciousness with the brain? So brain must have something that produces, that enables consciousness to identify with the brain. Now, some mystics, again, this history of thought is so interesting. Some mystics have always said, always have looked upon manifestation. And this adds to the mystique of the Maya theory, illusion theory. We have to escape. Their idea is that the body is a prison. Consciousness gets imprisoned in the body, in the brain. Now, this is an interesting idea. And as an idea, of course, that's one way of thinking. We have been deriving that throughout the course that I teach, because we are making the imprisonment a joyful experience. But because of their outlook that the world is illusory and therefore escaping is what makes sense, they always use the word imprisonment as a metaphor to motivate people to get out of the prison. But in a funny kind of way, it has to be like that. It is a sort of entrampment, or it is a sort of fooling itself. The mathematician G. Spencer Brown, he writes very beautifully about this. Oh, wrong one. Where is my pen? Oh, is okay? Okay. So now, G. Spencer Brown says there is only this one thing. There is this one thing. That's it. That's the world. Otherwise the world doesn't make sense. Model of reality got to be based on oneness. Otherwise it does not make any sense. Because dualism. Right? How do the dual parts interact? That problem will haunt us. So there has to be just one thing. And then the mystery of the world is, how does this one thing split? That one part experiences the other part as separate from itself. How does this distinction occur? So he defines that as a distinction. The mystery of the world is to find an explanation of how the distinction, that one part is subject and the other part is object. How is this distinction taking place? So all this thinking is leading to something. Distinction, imprisonment. entrapment, that's another word. Entrapment. Or even take the word Maya, which is used in Sanskrit and interpreted in many, many different ways, creating a lot of confusion. But even the word Maya can be looked at as a sort of illusory entrapment, identity. Illusory identity. Consciousness gets eluded into identifying with the brain. We are forced to think in that way. We are forced to think in that way because just one thing. Somehow it thinks that it is true. And then quantum physics adds a further mystery. It's only potential of that one thing, potential of oneness. Only one is it cannot actualize without separate pressurizing. That's what quantum physics is saying. When it actualizes, one part becomes subject, the other part becomes object. So one thing is very clear, the part that becomes a subject must be different from the part that becomes the object. And this idea of irreducible complexity comes handy. This idea of holism comes handy. So these objects must be very special wholes that cannot be reduced to the parts, whereas a rock can be reduced completely to the parts. So we are now getting ideas. And then the final crucial idea was provided by Hofstadter, who was studying computer, how to make a conscious computer, and he was studying sentences like I am a liar. This is the one that you are familiar with. I like this one the most. So let's analyze this again. We have done this many times. And you remember, if I am a liar, then I'm telling the truth. If I'm telling the truth, then I'm lying. Mule is lying. Funny, right? But it is a very, very good hint of what is going on. All of a sudden, if I stay with this logic, I can continue forever saying it again and again and again and again, and sort of feel entrapped by the sentence. Right? Kind of entrapment. If I identify with this logic, if I am telling the truth, then I am lying. If I am lying, then I am telling the truth. I can go on repeating and it will not resolve itself. It will just continue this way, right? So then the idea is that can the entrapment be something like this? Can it be that the brain has mechanisms of this kind that one cannot function without the other, that produces an entrapment like this, that consciousness has to go back and forth between them, and once consciousness wants to engage the brain in some ways, this potentiality gets entrapment, and then actuality can happen because one part has a distinction from the other parts that it's trying to also collapse. Okay? Think about this, what I'm saying. Consciousness has two kinds of potentiality. One kind of potentiality has this irreducible complex consisting of two apparatuses which mutually co-create each other. How can consciousness identify with it? Consciousness, of course, all potentiality is potentiality of consciousness itself. Okay, why don't you set up the slides and we'll show that. I'll write over there and you can project over here. That's are you with me so far? Be patient because this is the hardest part of the entire quantum worldview. Okay? So again, if I can set up that liar sentence somehow where the identity with the sentence, a playful identity, an identity which is certainly a pretend identity, but if I do that, if I start saying repeatedly, if I'm telling the truth and realize that yes, then I'm a liar, I'm lying, and immediately realize the other end, if I'm lying, then however, I am telling the truth because I am a liar, then it's the truth. But if I'm a liar, then I'm contradicting myself. And then I am lying because I'm contradicting myself. So I can go on and on and on and on. If I'm telling the truth, I'm lying. If I'm lying, I'm telling the truth. And then go on and on. Similarly, if there are two apparatuses where you think you have it, and then you find that no, you don't have it, so you come back to the other apparatus, okay? And let's see, what picture do we have? We have Escher's drawing hands. That's a good picture too. It's like left hand drawing the right hand drawing the left hand. That's another appearance. It's an appearance. Consciousness has to create an appearance, the Maya, which is an appearance. Appearance is illusory. It's an illusory appearance. Illusion. It has to create an illusion. Right? And in that illusion, it is entrapped. This is the idea. Okay? So the illusion is created in the brain in the form of what we say. This sentence is called a tangled hierarchy. The two parts are creating each other. Escher's drawing hand is called a tangled hierarchy. There's an appearance that the left hand is drawing the right hand and right hand is drawing the left hand, but these are all illusion and easy to get rid of by our thinking. What happens in the case of brain and consciousness? It's not easy to get rid of because I get rid of it, so I get out of it. And then what? If I'm out of it, then I am back to unity. Right? So the illusion is what is manifestation. This way, so we can call the manifestation illusion, that's one way. But if we call manifestation illusion, then let's look at that. Let's look at that. If we call the manifestation illusion, then what are we saying? We are making reality into potentiality. Then we are saying potentiality is reality and manifestation is unreal. This is topsy-turvy. Ladies and gentlemen, this is nonsense, right? I mean, make sense of it. Does that make sense? That we call potentiality reality and what is happening, the actuality, as illusion? What kind of logic is that? You see? So this inconsistency of logic, this is what we have to do. That mysticism. This is why it's correctly called mysticism. It's not consistent. When you connect these ideas with quantum physics, you see clearly that's why we must change, we must reframe the mystical literature also. Just as we reframe completely scientific literature, recognizing that matter is not the ground of being, it couldn't, because the human being is impossible. Sentience is impossible, life is impossible. Similarly, we have to change mysticism as well, because mystical argument is all topsy-turvy. How can potentiality be called reality and manifestation, experience, can be called unreal or illusion. No, that's not the right way of thinking. Right way of thinking is that there is an illusory construction by which potentiality is transformed into actuality. Because oneness, potential oneness can only be experienced as a separateness by creating an illusory trap in potentiality. Potentiality, potential consciousness enters the brain with the idea of seeing at the rest of the world through the eyes of the brain. Okay? But all this is potentiality. Potentiality interacts with potentiality, and this particular interaction consists of this oneness, part of the processing. The oneness processes the brain in order to look at the rest of the world through the eyes of the brain. All in potentiality. But as soon as it does that, it uses this apparatuses, and let's now be specific. We know those apparatuses, we have gone through that before. So there is this perception apparatus, and there is this memory apparatus. And here is the tangle hierarchy for the brain. Unless there is perception, there is nothing to memorize, but unless there is memory, there is not going to be any one-way time. Memory is needed for creating one-way time. One-way time is what defines the world. That separation has two definitions. The world of separateness brings in two things. One is the self, and the other thing it brings the concept of one-way time. Both are essential for collapse. Collapse cannot be defined without one-wayness of time, because something that has to happen to time. The living can be done only in time. If time is two ways, then life would be transitory. We live and we die, we live and we die. And that's just potentiality. In order to live, we have to have a reference point. Life needs these memories to have the reference point. Without that, we cannot define life. There's nothing to live for. We don't have a place to stand on. Memories, essential part of life and sentience. Without it, time cannot be one way. Time is two ways. It's the reversibility of memory, semi-permanence of memory, that produces this illusion and makes it compulsory. So we have created this tangled hierarchy, and look at what happens. Consciousness enters the brain with the idea of looking through its eyes, and in the process, it looks at the image that the brain has created, all in potentiality. The object is there, eye sees it, creates the retina image. Retina image is processed by the electrical apparatuses of the higher brain centers, and it produces an image. But there is no screen, is there? What happens? Here it is.
So does quantum physics provide any method of defining something which could be called as packets of potential memories?
With this potentiality that we are calling possibility waves, they do appear as packets only.
I mean,
that's a mathematical intricacy.
No, not the mathematical part. The collective memory, when we talk about collective memory, and everybody's experience is forming a part of a collective memory in which somebody can tap in. So when we talk of waves of possibility, then it is just any possibility which is then undefined. So you talk about these conditioned potentialities, which are in a way less uncertain. So that's why it's already a memory in which somebody can tap in. It's a potential memory because still not in the neuron of that brain, but somebody using whatever mechanism.
No, memory is, well, of course, the memories go back into potentiality in that sense, if you want to call it potential memory. But memory is something that is has that characteristic of introducing an irreversibility. That is what we call memory. Memory cannot be reversed. Potentialities, so long as they are potentialities, they are reversible potentialities. Potentialities can arise, potentialities also can return to its original state. Okay, this is what we mean by two-way time. So time is two ways, the potentiality can arise and potentiality goes back to the origin. So long as this happens, there is no irreversibility creating the one-wayness of time, which is the other essential part of creating reality. Reality depends on two things. One is the separateness of oneness into two, distinction, self and the other. And the other is that this time which was two-way before, independent of, is timeless, this domain of oneness has no sense of time. Time can go both ways is what we mean by that. But that sense changes. Although this world is transitory, comes and goes as we experience it, but some parts of the world retain that irreversibility that takes place. That's what we call memory. We remember. We remember that something happened before.
Yeah.
That's what gives that self a place to stand on. I was here before. I can recall what happened before with a greater probability for recalling that. Everything else are all of no probability at all, but this thing will come to me with increasing probability. And so I can remember who I am. That remembering is part of making that reality.
Yeah, so that is what I'm trying to have it make sense for me, is that when we talk of this collective memory,
whether it is collective memory,
or we talk of these mind which stays outside.
It's not untrue that we can have collective memories.
Yeah.
Because we do have collective memories, which are called collective unconscious, but it's not necessary for this argument.
No, but also like, let's say when we talk about the reincarnation principle, which is about carrying the propensities further and then these past life recalls and all that. So somewhere that memory is there, which the current brain is able to access through some mechanism.
Yeah, the memory is to be defined in quantum physics because everything is potentiality when we are not experiencing. What is the difference between a potentiality which is memory and which is not memory? The difference is that the probability for eliciting, remembering, recalling a memory is greater than which I have not lived before. That's the only difference. In quantum physics, everything is potentiality.
Yeah.
Memory and everything else that I have not experienced before, those are also potentialities, but there's a big difference between potentiality that I have experienced before versus that I have not experienced before. Big difference is in the probability of recalling it. That is the difference, right? The probability, increase of probability defines the memory.
So where does that recording reside? Because recording needs...
It's only the probability. So everything comes back to the laws. The laws are being modified. Now the laws were given in terms of probability of what can happen. This is why everything could be reversed. Because everything has equal probability. This way or that way makes no difference. Now some things are more probable to occur than other things.
So that is the conditioned potentiality.
That is what is called memory. And this memory then is defining reality, because no longer can I go back to what was before. Before everything was reversible. I could go back to what was before. But now I cannot. I cannot change these probabilities once they happen.
So this memory does not have to reside necessarily only in the neurons of the brain. It can reside somewhere else.
No, the memory is associated with the brain. That is also very important to understand, because otherwise we will not get the tangled hierarchy. Brain itself is a potentiality. Within the brain, something now is different. Before, all potentialities had equal probabilities to occur. Now, this potentiality has increased, enhanced probability to be manifest. That's the difference. And that difference is what brings in the one-oneness of time.
Patricia has a question.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Dr. Goswami, could we say that matter is a reference in space and memory is a reference in time, and that all takes place in the moment of the observer experience?
Can you come again, please?
Could we say that matter is a reference in space and memory is a reference in time, and that all takes place in the moment of the observer experience?
Yeah, I mean, now let's see if I'm getting the gist of what you're saying. Everything exists in space and time, but in the domain of potentiality, space and time has no manifest existence. There are potentialities, right? What do we mean by that? They are parameters for labeling these possibility waves. They are parameters, and so space and time has no real existence, and they're just parameters. Now, in this space, we never differentiate between forward direction, backward direction, or up and down. Those things are irrelevant for having experience. What defines an experience? Well, there are two things that defines an experience. An experience is defined by having a subject-object split. And the second thing that experiences the difference is that experience is irreversible. That irreversible quality has to come. Otherwise, there is no experience. Experience must have irreversibility. Once I have experience, I cannot undo that experience. I cannot create complete, go back to the world that was before the experience. Got it? Experience has that irreversible quality. It has to have that. Because otherwise, there is no reference point is being created. If an irreversible world means nothing, because I won't have any collateral. Yeah.
Yes, so experience happens in the present time, in the moment of perception.
Right.
And this is an entangled hierarchy with the memory, because the memory becomes the reference in time.
Just as the self has to be. What is that? Okay, I'm too close to this.
You look at the camera.
Okay, just as the self has to.
Look at the camera.
Self has to be separate from the environment or the subject-object split. Similarly, we must have irreversibility that is brought about, because otherwise there is no definition of an experience. If I don't remember, then it's not an experience. This is the point to think about. Okay? In other words, memory is an essential component of an experience. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Amity, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Amity, over here, you talk about perception and memory being most important. And then just a while back, when we were talking about the spirituality, the data of memory seemed not very tangible or important, so I'm a little confused.
Here is the question, which is very, very important, and this is where we see the nature of puzzles that we have in order to go back to the origin. So, memory, the same thing that brings about existence, brings about manifestation, brings about reality, makes what was potentiality into something that we can call real. Because we can hold on to. That reality depends on something becoming real. That cannot change anymore. What cannot change? Everything is subject to change except this time. Time cannot change. Time's direction, once it's established inexorably, the next experience is going to happen in time. And we can tell the previous time because we have memory of that. Okay? So manifestation has to be defined very clearly. What was potentiality is now actuality. So this is real. Why? Because something in it cannot be changed. In spiritual world, we are talking in some sense, going back to the origin. We are saying that returning to the source. I want to return to the source. This is the yearning that the sage has. I don't want this entrapment. See the problem? And this is why the sage gets rid of the ego, gets rid of the memories that define the self, and then one is free, because then there is no reality anymore, one is returning to the potentiality.
But Tamaji, it is not always liberation, it is just the experience of the Godhead, if you would say. That experience itself is a memory which, as yesterday we talked about the expansion, that changes the person itself.
The memories build the person. And of course certain memories are more desirable than other memories, but those are the questions of what makes us happy. What makes us happy is what expands us. So we don't want memories that create disharmony, create imbalance towards this way versus that way. So those are questions which will of course come up. What kind of memory is what we want? Because memories that make us suffer, then they increase our distance from the oneness that we don't want. We want memories of a particular kind that will give us a reference point, but those memories will not take away our access to the oneness, because oneness brings us expansion. So these are questions of strategy of how to live. But the questions of manifestation is a different one. For manifestation, we have to have memories what I'm trying to impress upon you. Just as we have to have self, the separateness, similarly, we also have to have memory.
So, will it be right to say that memory is a tangible data also?
Memory is what makes an experience an experience. An experience which cannot be recalled is a reversible memory. That is of no good. Anything that can be reversed, I cannot say that anything has occurred, anything has been real, anything has been manifest. So reality, manifestation, everything depends on this one-wayness of time. And reality, notice how difficult to define reality. Because potentiality is not reality, obviously. I mean, we cannot really call, anybody want to argue about it? Calling potentiality a reality, that's one choice we have. We can define potentiality as reality, which people did in the olden days.
So actually, in some of the literature, people refer to soul as a recorder, a memory recorder. So it's just a, a place, an entity which, collects all the memories in the flow of time in that one direction.
Yeah, that one is bringing in and then the concept of memory in the defined definition of the soul.
Yes, so they like to call soul as a memory recorder. So that is where all the memories are.
Yeah, those are concepts which you have to examine later, but anything that we can identify with, right, has to have that aspect.
Yeah, and also there comes another question that although as you say that a memory which is gone, I mean which cannot be retained, is of no consequence. Okay, because
it does not define us to the place to stand on. Let's look at a child.
No, but just here, like for example, when we try to transform ourselves or deal with our negative emotional brain circuits, we talk about all these ideas of forgiveness. Okay, so by forgiveness, what we are doing is we are trying to change the nature of the memory which is making us respond in a particular way. Or we can even think of it as we use this word integrating it. So, but the nature of memory, or possibly when I think about it, I think the emotions which that memory raises, that is what we are trying to change.
Yeah, those are again strategies of how to go back and stuff, but not strategies of manifestation itself. What I'm trying to impress is that for the manifestation to take place, one has to identify with something. Now, part of the identification is with the Tango hierarchy, the entrapment. And the other part of the identification is memory. That oneness of time, that irreversibility. Once I've identified, this identification is permanent. This identification is not going to go away. Something tangible has taken place. Something that can be repeated. Okay? Otherwise, it will just go back and forth and so forth. So you see how much the problem of manifestation of defining reality, the reason we are going into this very difficult philosophical question, of course, is that you already have the basic understanding of everything. I mean, I hope you remember all that, right? Tango hierarchy is not a foreign concept, otherwise I would not even speak about this. But these are deep issues. And these deep issues you need to think about in order to get a feel for what quantum physics is bringing to us, the enormity of it, the enormity of the new conception, the new ways that we have to formulate all our philosophies, all our worldviews. Quantum physics is forcing it upon us. Before we were very lackadaisical about it. We did not examine things correctly. We are very careless about things like what we threw in, like Maya in Indian philosophy or in the Western ways of looking at things. Occasionally people are talking with glimpses of insight, like Master Eckhart. Okay, God, without you, I could not exist, but you could not exist without me. A glimpse of enormous insight. But that's all we have. We never really had a clear understanding of this mystery, of how does the manifestation come about, how does the one become many. This is the mystery, perpetual mystery. Oneness people have discovered in all cultures at various times, in every culture. Even Native Americans, we don't value these cultures very much sometimes. But they have this concept of oneness. Every spiritual culture feels that. Many, many cultures all over the world discovered oneness. But they could not figure out how does the one become many. So other people defined already, well, look, many is what creates everything. Matter is what creates everything. This is tangible, this is reality. And who can object? This is reality, we can see. It has a semi-permanence. At some point, the reversibility of time is so compulsory. The external world is so compulsory, it does seem that it is real. We can check everything. Every day we come and we remember, oh, this is a new day. We clearly remember the past. We cannot go there. Nobody is able to go to the past, but in our memory it's clear, right? When you start forgetting it, we say Alzheimer's disease, you have dementia. When we cannot remember the past anymore, right? A conscious person remembers the past. And that's what defines him. I have a past. I'm a grown-up person. I had a childhood, right? How does this illusion get created from that oneness? This is from the other side. So it's easy to talk about, I'll make a model from the other side because otherwise we cannot understand the human being. It's easy to say that, all mystics are saying that, but they're not capable of making a complete model. How does this happen? What I'm saying is this is an enormous problem to solve, and this is solving the problem by bringing in tangled hierarchy, by bringing in not only an entrapment of consciousness that one part will see itself separate from the other part, but also creating this one-ness of time which gives a reference point for the self. And notice how the self actually manifests. Does the self manifest at the tangled hierarchical level? It doesn't. Well, even when the tangled hierarchy is created, do we experience the quantum self? We don't have the sense of self. Look at the child. Look at the baby. Those of you who have not been parents will not understand this, but many of you are mothers and many of us are fathers, so we know what happened. You pick up the baby, it knows nothing. Nothing. Right? It has no place to stand on. No memories. It is an amazing thing how babies learn to perceive. There is no perception. There is eyes that are open, and there is, in a certain sense, where wakefulness, but there is no identity there. And then gradually we see the identity returns, recognition starts happening. Memory is being created. It's an amazing thing to see. Without that memory, the collapse process is barely taking place. Of course, every collapse produces a memory. So in a certain sense, yes, the baby immediately should have a little bit of something. But that little bit really takes several days before the little bit starts making, okay, the baby is really doing things which have a little bit of self in it. It takes a full year for the baby to really have a self to speak of. Why? Because that's when the memories are clear and those secondary collapses will take place and consciousness will identify. So consciousness does not immediately identify with the tangled hierarchy unless it has the past memories built up. So that those secondary events, we went through that in the neuroscience course, the pre-conscious, unless that builds up and then we have this half a second and then the ego identity takes place, and that's when consciousness identifies. Until the memories are there, consciousness cannot even identify with the brain. The tangled hierarchy is not enough to produce an identity. All this is very important. Why? Because if we want to reverse it or the other way, then we have to think about it. We have to disengage with this process which has taken place, which has given us identity and all this. Is disengaging a very good idea? Not necessarily. Unless you really want to quit the game, one has to think, why should I disengage with the process? Because then I will be gone. We don't think. Self-realization sounds wonderful, but think of the process we have to reverse. We really have to give up that solid base or that was for that experience. Otherwise, if we want to stay with that solid base that we call our ego, then obviously we cannot get into full liberation. I got you, Ed. Yeah.
So, Amitji, can't the self-realization come with the ego self also?
That's the problem. That's the problem. So we have to at least temporarily disengage with the ego identity, no? Otherwise, we cannot get to that kind of hierarchical experience, which is what we are looking for. That experience that people call enlightenment or self-realization experience. That experience requires us to catch that entrapment immediately as consciousness is identifying with the tangled hierarchy, without going through this memory processing that we go through. Or disengage enough. The descriptions in the literature gives us a hint, and Franklin Burroughs gives a very, very good description. What one needs is not complete disidentification. What one needs is a detachment. Identification has two components. Identification is complete negation. Disidentification is complete negation, but disidentification also can happen if I admit that yes, they are there, but I don't attach to them. We disengage from them. This is why the word detachment or non-attachment is used. If I'm not attached to them, then they can happen, the memories can happen, and the ego experience can happen, and the experience of Savikalpa Samadhi in the description of a modern person is very different than the description you find in the literature, who are not quite modern and quite scientific in their thinking. Franklin Burroughs writes it very clearly. Yes, I had this timelessness, this feeling of universality and all this. At the same time, the ego experience really never went away. But I had the ability of not paying attention to it. That's how he describes it. Whereas in the literature you will find a description of just a euphoria experience in the oneness, but they are not describing it fully. The experience that I had, again, the experience was, and I don't never claim that it's a self-realization experience. This is the reason that I don't claim. Because my experience was, I had that feeling of oneness, and then it returned. My body-centered body, ego just completely returned. That I could see that yes, I am still my ego and I still have that flavor of oneness, that wonderful feeling, that joy, all that existed. And then came the feeling of universal love. I could love everyone. So that was my experience also. But in the literature, things are very mixed up between this being lost in the oneness. And that makes it sound like we have completely left the ego and just situated in that oneness experience. Franklin's description gave me a lot of clarity that the ego never disappears, because if it did, we have problem in understanding reality and collapse and all this stuff.
Yes, and also you mentioned that when we have a memory, a perception and a memory, say of Savikalpa Samadhi, if we have a memory of that, and if we repeat that again and again, over a period of time, it will be easier to reach that faster rather than
not necessarily. I make a memory of the experience, but that experience itself, of course, does not have any memory. It's a spontaneous experience. The experience is of the experience. Yes, we can memorize that and remember. That memory is never potent. That sense of oneness you don't get from the memory.
You must be getting some feeling or some feel of it.
You get some feel of it. Yes, you can get some feel of it. Feel doesn't help. I have tried, initially when that experience happened, I have tried so many times just to recreate that by remembering what happened. I couldn't do nothing. I mean, just a memory experience. Yes, I felt good, but not that spontaneity of that experience just cannot be created. That's the problem. And why it cannot be created? Because you don't have in the memory the that spontaneous experience. You do not have that in the memory. By the time the memory comes back, the ego is back also. We just did not pay attention and therefore forgot to notice it. But Franklin's writing makes it very, very clear that he was paying attention and he saw clearly that yes, there is this experience, there is also the other experience. It does not go away. And that's important to recognize, because otherwise consciousness has no place to stand on, and therefore it would not be able to create that. We get lost in the affect feeling, the joyful feeling of the oneness, so we don't pay the attention to the other part. That's my interpretation of it. Anyway, is it making more sense of why, how and why reality is created and it is so complex to define reality? How can we define reality then without manifestation? We have to do both. We have to agree that the potentiality and manifestation together is what reality is. Reality needs God and sentience. Reality needs God and life, both. Otherwise, we cannot really say that that is reality. Okay? Think about it. I'm posing this as developing a worldview that would be useful and reproducible and something to hold on to, and without paradoxes. This is the goal. And I want you to all engage in the process, because these questions will come up when we replace the current worldview with a completely consistent worldview. Because these are the questions that really makes people suspect about the whole spiritual, mystical philosophies that every culture has tried to build. And we never completely quite succeed in the past because we have not been able to answer such questions. Quantum physics is giving us a fresh opportunity of redefining the entire thing. And this time, the closer we come to expressing and answering these questions of what defines reality, the better is our chance for quantum activism. Quantum activism crucially depends on our credibility. How solid is the philosophy that we are trying to establish? Can it answer all these difficulties that people have constantly struggled with in the past? We have answered the question, how the one becomes many, I hope satisfactorily with these ideas of Andrew hierarchy, but we have to make sure. And I want every one of you to engage with this process. Yes, please.
Amitji, in many times in the spiritual practices, some people say that giving words to the experience is the mind's work, and mind has a intelligence to get engaged in things which it seems as having some answers to, but in spiritual practices, it is the experience, and it's sometimes the silence experience. So what would you say to that?
Yeah, that is a valid point. That is one way of thinking. But we know too many other examples how experiences can fool us. Not having sophistication in our understanding is never a good excuse. Because the problem is that if we don't develop sophisticated theory, we are always guided by primitive theories. And this is why people make very primitive model of what is going on that cannot be sustained in the front of other people thinking other ways. We really have to take this job very seriously. We really have to get back to the idea that there is only one truth. We cannot exist in an unsustained human civilization if we give up the concept of one truth. There got to be one description of reality about which everybody sooner or later has to agree upon. This is important, because otherwise what happens is that idea that truth is relative takes over, and this is the one destroyer of civilization, if there is any destroyer of civilization. If human beings cannot rely on truth being absolute, that there is something that we can call fact, there is something that is not illusion, there is something that is not a construction of illusory mind or a designing mind with agenda. If we cannot trust that, then there is no civilization, then anything goes. What is happening right now is a situation has arisen where people in the world are claiming various things to be true. And this cannot be. We can always find any experience having some validity. I bring in concept of ghost and you will find people who have seen ghosts. I bring in concepts of red herring and there will be people who have seen red herring. But does that mean red herrings exist or unicorns exist or ghosts exist? This is the problem, no? And we got to bring up the idea that no, there is one common ways, acceptable ways that reality can be constructed and quantum physics is giving it. If you think that quantum physics is not giving it, we also have to completely admit, okay, this is the paradox still that exists, but so far I have not found any. And this is what I am claiming, that all these paradoxes that have existed before can be solved in quantum physics. Okay? Now we really need to take a break. Let's take a break and we come back in half an hour and continue our discussion. Okay?